Hello everyone, I am Jacob Kirkle, and today I'm going to talk to you about why Pluto is no longer a planet. When we were all in elementary school, we were taught about the 9 planets of the solar system. But in 2003, a discovery happened that was going to change that for potentially ever. And that was the discovery of Eris, which was another celestial body kind of like Pluto, and they were debating over whether to make it a planet or not. But at the time, we did not have a by-the-book definition of what a planet was. So in 2006, the International Astronomical Union got together and decided on a set of rules that would define what a planet and a dwarf planet is. And on August 24th, Pluto was downgraded to the status of dwarf planet, making us one of the last generation to learn of Pluto as a planet. And when I was younger, I would always go to the Great Lakes Science Center down in Cleveland with my father, and I always had interest in science and liked the astronomy exhibit. So I think it's important that such a drastic event occurred in our childhood that we should learn things about it and other things that occur around us in the universe. So in this presentation, I will cover the topics of a brief overview of the discovery of Pluto, the characteristics of Pluto versus the current 8 planets, and the decision that led to the downgrade of Pluto from planet to dwarf planet. First, talk about the discovery of Pluto. And it all began with Neptune being discovered in 1864, and the scientific community wondered if there were more planets beyond Neptune. And they believed there was because the orbit of Neptune and Uranus was affected by gravity, and so they hypothesized that there was another planet out there, and they named it Planet X. And Percival Lowell noticed these irregularities and was a front runner in the push to discover what eventually was Pluto. By using math, he calculated the probable location of Planet X, but died in 1916 before Pluto was actually discovered. But thankfully, 14 years later, in 1930, Clyde Tombaugh discovered Pluto at the wise age of 24. To define it, he took pictures of the spot where he believed Pluto was, and over time, put these pictures together in sort of like a movie type thing. And since the stars didn't move, but Pluto did, he watched as the light that was Pluto moved and discovered it that way. So now on to the characteristics. And since Pluto was finally found and observed, they started to realize how strange it really was. First off, it was the size and location. To give you perspective on why it was so hard to find, it was 3.6 billion miles away. Earth is from the sun, and Earth is only 93 million miles away from the sun, so it's much farther distant. And NASA's webpage on Pluto puts some perspective to the size of Pluto by saying, quote, Pluto is only 1,400 miles wide. It's about half the width of the United States, and Pluto is slightly smaller than the Earth's moon. Speaking of moons, Pluto has 3 moons. Its largest moon is Charon, but it is half the size of Pluto, which is odd because all the moons of the planets today are significantly smaller than the planets they orbit. And also, when it comes to the orbit, the 8 planets today orbit sort of in a disk shape, all kind of on the same plane, but Pluto rotates 17 degrees above that plane, and it's sometimes in front of Neptune, closer to the sun. And lastly, it is more similar in makeup to the 4 innermost planets than the outermost planets, where the innermost planets are rocky and the last 4 are gaseous. Then because of this, scientists believe that Pluto may have originated from some other part of the galaxy and kind of got sucked into the sun's orbit. So now you know more about Pluto. Let me explain why the decision was made to downgrade Pluto to a dwarf planet. And the International Astronomical Union, also known as the IAU, held a conference and in August 24, 2006, they downgraded Pluto to dwarf planet. The IAU was founded in 1919 and it has almost 11,000 highly qualified members from 92 different countries. The website they have states that their mission is to promote and safeguard the science of astronomy in all its aspects through international cooperation. So it's sort of like the UN for astronomy. And during that conference, they made new rules defining what planets and dwarf planets are. The IAU decided to define the planet as, quote, a celestial body that is A, in orbit around the sun, B, has sufficient mass for its self-gravity to form a nearly round shape, and C, has cleared the neighborhood around its orbit. The definition of a dwarf planet is fairly similar A and B, but the main difference is that a dwarf planet has not cleared its own orbit and it cannot be a satellite. So according to these definitions, there are currently 44 dwarf planets and 8 regular planets. So why did they decide to downgrade Pluto? Mainly because it has not cleared its orbit. Although there are some disagreements, because some scientists state that other planets, like Earth, have not cleared their orbit, but they have decided that that's why Pluto should not be a planet. But there's also other factors, such as the size, the odd orbit, and how it's much more similar to the other dwarf planets than our 8 planets we have now. So in conclusion, in less than 100 years of Pluto's discovery, it went from being a planet to a dwarf planet, but it also contributed much to the way we define celestial bodies in our solar system. Pluto's strange orbit, inability to clear objects from its orbit, and relatively small size help set guidelines for what dwarf planets are like and how to define regular planets. And even though the IAU has deemed it a dwarf planet, we are still studying it. NASA has sent out a spacecraft called New Horizons, which is expected to reach Pluto in 2015. So even though we are the last generation to know of Pluto as a planet, we will not be the last generation to study it.